Welcome back to the Nikki Clarke Show. The show is about transforming lives one story at a time, and we invite people from all walks of life to come and share their heart stories, stories of upliftment and transformation. And I am so honored to have the current Secretary-Treasurer for the SEIU Healthcare Canada. Tyler Downey has been the Treasurer since September 2018 and has been with the SEIU for the past 14 years, holding several roles within that time. Tyler is a trustee on the Nursing Home Pension Plan and is the board chair for My 65 Plus, which is a TFSA-driven retirement plan geared to low-income workers who don't have access to traditional workplace pension plans. Tyler, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Nikki. Very happy and privileged to be here.
Wonderful. Tyler, I know you have so much that you are guiding right now, and I just wanted to ask you to tell us a little bit about your background leading up to where you are now.
So I started, I guess, my activism and sort of leadership journey as a community organizer in Jane and Finch, where I grew up. So I was born in Regent Park. I grew up in Jane and Finch, and one of my first sort of moments of activism and leadership was organizing the community there, particularly youth. We had a real youth focus, but really evolved into the broader community on issues around education. And at the time, there was a government that was looking to reduce the number of schools in the area. We, as a community, had major concerns with that. And so I really started to get myself involved in pushing back that agenda because of the negative impacts that we knew they were going to cause to that community. And so that's where I started from. And, as an organizer doing that type of work, coming to the union, it was a natural fit for me, I think. It's really led me here. So that's kind of where I started, really community organizing, building awareness on education, but also on, tenant issues and housing, and especially in that type of neighborhood where it's lower income citizens that really need a voice. And so I played a part in just helping to mobilize around issues in that community. That's kind of where I came from.
Excellent. So I can hear your passion. You've been, involved in activism at a very early age, and here you are now with this incredible position and responsibility in SEIU. So we are dealing with so much right now because of the COVID-19 pandemic. People are going through a range of all kinds of emotions, and you are working alongside the frontline workers, the essential workers, the healthcare force. What's it been like right now with COVID-19? What are you hearing frontline, Tyler?
Well, first off, I think I just wanted to take a moment to just recognize the three personal support workers that were part of the SEIU family that have died during this pandemic. Christine Mandagarian, Sharon Roberts, and Arlene Reed. So they were personal support workers working in long-term care facilities who had, worked for many years in those facilities and contracted the virus and have now passed. And so, the impact has been devastating, obviously, to their families. We're extremely devastated. And so, we've been, in contact with their families ever since the passing and helping them arrange things. And so I think that's one of the things that I just wanted to start with, to your question, Nikki, it's a devastating moment for all healthcare workers.
Yes. Yes.
And their families. The other thing that I would say is extremely devastating and just horrific is the over 1,200 residents, and I would assume many of them, if not all of them, are seniors that have passed as well. During this pandemic in long-term care facilities. And quite naturally, the frontline workers who had cared for these residents have a natural bond and a tie to those folks. And there's an extra layer of devastation there. So you have the workers there who are being affected. Some have passed. We've been tracking over 1,200 of our own members have been tested positive for COVID-19, and then you have the residents that have passed. So just all around, it's been a lot of devastation, a lot of anxiety and fear that has sort of ripped through the healthcare system. So I think those are the things that we hear a little bit about, but we don't hear so much about in the public eye. So I just wanted to draw that out a bit. One other thing that I would say is definitely happening there that doesn't get spoken about much is the mental health, aspects of what's happening. And so here at SEIU, we initiated very early on in the pandemic, when the pandemic called back in March, we initiated a dedicated mental health line for our members, knowing that they were going to experience a whole range of emotions and situations in their lives throughout this pandemic. And so we arranged a call line for them. And so we've been getting a number of members calling in, just seeking support, wanted to talk with someone. Some of these members are, single mothers who don't really have much family, and so just needing to speak with someone about what they're going through is definitely something that's happening on a daily basis. So I think those are things that I think will help describe what's currently taking place during this pandemic for healthcare workers.
Absolutely. It's really something that pulls at my heartstrings, because we're talking about people who have taken an oath to save lives, and they're putting their lives at risk going out daily to do this. So there is the discipline they have to put everything they know and follow the direction to keep everybody well, but they're dealing with the trauma of their own peers, passing because of this pandemic, and people, like you said, they've made relationships with, they've created these bonds with over time, and people in long-term care. So it's I can't imagine the devastation. And then your role now as part of organizing, but you're also part of the counseling, part of the healing mission to support the healthcare workers. So how are you during this? I know you have to be this pillar of strength, but who is supporting you during this time?
I would say I really lean on my faith during this time. It's a big part of my upbringing. My mom raised me in a Christian home, and it was the rock and the center of how we lived our lives. And how we continue to live our lives. And so that's the first thing that really keeps me grounded and centered and focused on how do we help in this moment. The second part that really helps me get through the days is our courageous members, these courageous healthcare workers. I can't imagine what it's like as a personal support worker or a nurse or a developmental support worker that is waking up in the morning, leaving their family, and they don't know if they are going to be able to return, because if they get exposed to a COVID positive patient, they have to go into isolation and they have to leave their family. I can't even imagine what they're going through. So the strength of our members has really helped me push a little bit harder to do even more. So those are the two things that have definitely helped me, along with, the staff that we have at SEIU. We talk every day, and I mean, the conference calls are getting a bit much, but we're trying to check in with each other as much as we can.
Absolutely, and that's wonderful. Tyler, this is an aside, but it's just a thought that occurred to me yesterday. I was traveling to, do my weekly grocery run and be prepared to wait in a very long line to do so. But I heard that there was a nurse, and I'm sorry the name escapes me, but she was dealing with discrimination because as she was applying for housing, the potential landlords heard what she did for a living, and they refused to give her a home. So she just recently found a place, but it took her a few months. Are you hearing situations now where people in healthcare are dealing with discrimination because of the work they do?
Absolutely. One of the members, which obviously I won't name my name here, but we had a member of ours who worked in a long-term care facility, single mother who had some domestic issues at home, was forced to go into a shelter during the pandemic, brought her child and herself to the shelter, was accepted into the shelter. The moment the shelter found out that she worked at a healthcare facility, they kicked her out.
Oh, my goodness.
So now you got to think, she can't go home because there's domestic issues that she doesn't want to go back to. The shelter said, well, no, we can't have you because, we can't afford to have you spread in, and we don't know if you're positive or not. So the shelter kicked her out. And the only place that she had to turn to was her union. So her employer, wasn't going to give her any accommodations because of the situation. There was no sympathy. There was no recognition of the unique situation that she was in, trying to, maintain herself as a healthcare worker, but also, show strength to her child that she's with. And so we intervened right away. We helped arrange temporary accommodations for her somewhere. And then we had multiple discussions with the employer, and then they finally agreed to put her up into a hotel. And so, but all that took, a week and a half to figure out, but we were able to help her temporarily. But it's just one of the examples that we've heard of that our members have been a part of. So it's scary.
Yeah. Hello?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes. So that's one of the examples you've heard of, and you've come around and been able to support in a major, major way.
Absolutely.
Wow. I'm just amazed at I can't imagine the disrespect. I mean, having, to put yourself out there on the line on a very vulnerable kind of position, and yet people look at you and turn you away. I just can't imagine what kind of disappointment and hurt that is for the person involved. But I'm so glad that that was able to work around for that person's favor and make it happen. Wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, and I feel like I could just add, I think that's the sad part about what's happening, Nikki, and what we're observing. Without calling any of the for-profit, operators of these long-term care facilities, because the majority of them are for-profit, there just doesn't seem to be any sympathy. There just doesn't seem to be any recognition of the devastating impacts of the pandemic that it has on their employees and their workers. And so the example I just gave is just one of those examples, but there are hundreds of examples out there where these employers have not done what we believe they should do in this moment to step up and offer additional supports without being forced to, right? It shouldn't take the union, the union to call and email and write and do those type of actions for the employers to do the right thing by their workers while we're going through a pandemic. And that's, I think, is the sad part about what we're observing right now.
I agree with you, and I completely acknowledge what you're saying, because you still have people who, I don't know if they're living in a bubble or it still hasn't occurred to them that there are people globally who are suffering, and there's an element of empathy that you have to their situation. So you have to give them time, you have to exercise patience. But I've seen people, just like you said, who just don't care, and it doesn't make any difference. There's some employers that are forcing employees to be in precarious situations, putting themselves at risk, or if they don't do this, then the outcome is they're going to let them go. And, people need to work if they don't have any other means of getting kind of income or support. And then you have all kinds of discriminatory actions that are happening to people who are, just looking to have some kind of livelihood. So it really is a shame, all this kind of self-absorption that I'm seeing. When before the pandemic kind of, went to that phase where everything was in a lockdown, I remember going into a store and seeing something that was like, it was a disinfectant, because all, the name brand one was sold out. I won't name the brand, but it went from $1.99 to $15 in one day. And I remember saying to the store owner, I'm like, how could you do that? This is like a very affluent neighborhood. Who do you think is going to come in here and buy a $15 bottle of disinfectant? Well, he says, because, I have to because of this. I said, no, who owns this place? And he said, well, I do. I said, well, then you have the absolute authority to call the shots on what you want to sell. And I think this is taking advantage of people. You're gouging people. And he kind of looked away and looked down, but he didn't change the price. It was still the same price up until now. So, yeah, it's really amazing, Tyler, how people, you really get to know who people are during a period of crisis. So I'm quite amazed, but I'm glad there are people like you and other people who understand the situation and how to really remedy as best you can what people can do to just get through this. And we are really, truly in this together. So, thank you for everything you're doing to support healthcare workers. Now, what can we do in the public? What can we do to support nurses and other healthcare professionals?
Well, I would say, and maybe if I could just add on another point, just on the last question, Nikki, I think, the situation that you described, and I was mentioning some of the employers and the treatment of some of these frontline healthcare workers. What's additionally sad about the situation is it just doesn't feel Canadian. It just doesn't feel like this is Canada. Like, I mean, I grew up here in Toronto. Like, I was born and raised. I grew up. And from the time I can remember, there was always this sense of Canada is this place where when the times are tough, people come together. We don't take advantage of each other. Our healthcare system is the greatest, and we treat each other with so much respect, and we're so friendly. And I mean, that's what I remember growing up, and even as an adult, that's the values that I believe we all subscribe to as Canadians. And so when I see and hear examples of the treatment of workers and the situation that you describe, like that it rubs me the wrong way, because that is not what I believe Canada is representative of. And so I feel like there has to be a way to like weed some of that out. So I just wanted to say that. I just think some of what we're seeing out there is just truly not reflective of who we are or who we should be as Canadians.
Absolutely.
So the what can folks do to support the nurses and the frontline workers? There are a couple things. One, I just want to mention that this is National Nursing Week. So, we at SEIU, we have a nursing division. We represent about 8,000 registered practical nurses and some registered nurses as well, and nurse practitioners in our union. And so we've launched a website where folks can go and, thank a nurse. That's really what I think is the first thing that folks can do. And so if I can just share the website that, folks can go to, that would be like a first step in terms of, people recognizing the great effort that nurses are doing during Nursing Week. So it's nursesunite.ca. Is the website that folks can visit, and then there's an opportunity to thank a nurse there. So that's one thing that I think folks can do tangibly. The second thing is one of the major issues that I know everyone has been aware of, we've heard it on media probably every day, is the lack of protection. For these frontline, not just nurses, but the PSWs, the housekeepers, the DSWs that are out there. There seems to be this, and I'm just going to call it what I think it is. There seems to be this myth that there's a lack of supply, out there, and a lot of the decisions that are being done in these, hospitals or long-term care facilities is based on, well, we don't have enough masks to go around, or we don't have enough proper protective equipment to go around, so we're going to have to rationalize in a way. And we don't think that's true. We don't think it's a major supply issue the way it's being described in the public. And so what I think folks can do to support the frontline workers is, call your MPP and demand that the government do their job to supply, but also the employers, and again, many of them are very profitable organizations, put up the money to supply the proper equipment for these frontline workers. Because what we're observing, Nikki, is there's many employers out there, and especially in the long-term care space. Some home care agencies are bad actors, if you will, as well. But especially in the long-term care facilities, they're not purchasing on their own. They're waiting for government to provide them with those resources. But yet we know they're multi-billion-dollar organizations. And so, reach out to your MPP, your local politician is one thing that we've been asking folks to do, just to drive the message a little bit further.
Okay, excellent. And I'm going to get you to repeat that website before we conclude today. So that's wonderful information to know to support our nurses, to support our healthcare workers, definitely. Now, Tyler, have you been thinking about what's going to happen on the other side when, everything kind of starts to reopen every stage, starts to engage again? Do you think the healthcare do you think it's going to be forever changed post-pandemic?
I imagine it will. I think there's a lot of learning that has happened throughout this pandemic. Many of the issues that we as a union have been raising for the last 2 years. I mean, we've been raising them for years, but just in the last 2 years for sure, have now been put into the spotlight. And so I would hope the leaders who have the ability to make those changes make them. So one thing I would point to is the protocols that are in place at these, that I'll just take long-term care as an example. It's one thing to have the protection, or maybe you don't have the protection, but it's another to ensure that in any type of pandemic or breakout or outbreak, there are strict protocols in place right away, and not allowing the infection to spread. And that's what we've seen, and that's what had led, we believe, to the deaths of some of the PSWs, because there wasn't, and the hundreds of residents have died, there wasn't enough urgency from the employers to do the right thing on infection controls. And so I think that's one thing that I believe and hope, and we're going to push to get some clear mandated protocols in place coming out of this thing. The other area that is definitely a need to reform is the pay. So when the government introduced temporary pandemic pay, highlighting the need to increase the wages temporarily until, I believe, August for frontline workers. So there's a couple things in there. One, they didn't include all frontline workers, so that's something we are really trying to push the government to, because there's many other workers outside of PSWs and nurses that are on the front line of this pandemic. But then two, we are saying it shouldn't be temporary. When you look at the wages of, let's say, a home care worker who is providing care in someone's home, every day they're driving to deliver care because that is the choice of that individual, or the hospital had discharged them to go home and get care. And we are relying on these home care workers to deliver great care, but yet they are working in poverty, like literally poverty,
yes.
Right? And so how does that work? How do you attract workers to go into that field if they know they're going to be working in poverty? It just doesn't make any sense to us. And so from the safety side and from, uplifting the wages for these workers, those are the two things that I think we are going to really go in on, and we're hoping to make some change there.
Okay, wonderful. And, we really have to reflect and look at all these lessons because we're seeing people put themselves at great risk. And thank you for summarizing the two basic things that every person needs. They need to have their basic needs met through, income and security. And those are the two things that are being compromised right now with healthcare workers. And this is about saving our lives. So if we have a system that has a huge crack in the middle where it comes to supporting healthcare workers, what does that say about supporting society as a whole? Because we need these people to keep us all well, and we had to go through this to see the gaping holes in the system. So I thank you so much for mentioning that. And yes, definitely, if you are living in Ontario, if you're living in anywhere in Canada, contact your MPP and let them know how you feel, what to do to engage and to support the healthcare workers in your locations. I know there are many listeners from the United States who are listening. How can they support healthcare workers where they are? Maybe New York, that's where most of our listeners are listening now. Where can they go?
Yeah, so so nursesunite.ca is our Nursing Week recognition for frontline nurses. Folks can visit that website. And then just generally, keeping up with SEIU Healthcare as the leading healthcare union here in Ontario. We SEIUhealthcare.ca is our website. We always have opportunities for folks to support campaigns or support initiatives that our union puts on to address various issues. So that may be another place that folks can go to, now and in the future, just to support the work that we're trying to do to advocate on behalf of frontline workers. Nikki, if you don't mind, I'd like to just say one other thing.
Sure.
You had mentioned earlier in this interview on, these frontline workers, they take an oath. And they take an oath to serve.
Yes.
And regardless of what role, they are in a hospital setting or the home care setting or long-term care, that oath is a serious oath that they take very seriously. But on the other side of that, while taking the oath, there is an inherent commitment that they are going to be protected when they go to work.
Yes.
They are going to be compensated fairly for the work that they do and respected for the work that they do. And so, I've heard and I've seen a lot of posts on, social media about, they've taken the oath to protect, so that's their job, and they should just be happy that they have a job because a lot of us are unemployed. And I just think that type of rhetoric is not helpful, during a pandemic and even outside of a pandemic.
Yes.
I think the division that creates is not helpful. But what I would say, though, just to answer your question in a different way, is, if folks are seeing those type of comments online, or if you're a part of forums, or and there's a bashing of healthcare workers, or people trying to create division, I would say to those folks, observing that that's a moment where you can help by weighing in. You can help by, countering that narrative that folks are trying to create. So that's just another thing I think people can do.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're quiet, if you're silent, then you're acquiescing. You're kind of agreeing by your silence, although it may not be where you are. But yes, just like you said, countering, debating, offering up another angle, and I think that's very wise in having people make their own decisions, right? Instead of just one point of view all the time. So I thank you so much for giving many points of view so that people can make up their own minds and what you're doing to support the workers. I have nurses in my life. I have a number of aunts who are nurses, and I have cousins who are nurses, and I pray for them daily for their lives. And some of them even share some heartbreaking situations that they're going through on Facebook, and they're imploring people to follow safety regulations. And there's still some people who are, just being very reckless about their own lives and putting people at risk. So I just want to say that love nurses, hug a nurse if you have a nurse in your life. And again, Tyler, thank you so much for taking this time to edify me and the listeners. And again, how can people reach out to you and also to support the healthcare workers through the union?
Yeah, I mean, SEIUhealthcare.ca is our main website. NursesUnite.ca is our Nursing Week website there that folks can visit as well. Myself, I'm on Facebook at Tyler Downey SEIU, as well as LinkedIn under Tyler Downey if folks wanted to connect with me offline.
Beautiful. Thank you again. This is the Nikki Clarke Show with our very special guest, Tyler Downey. Tyler, I'm going to pray for you, and I really am so thankful for everything that you've shared. You are a wonderful force supporting all the people who are looking up to you for mentoring and to, give them a little ray of hope through these very challenging, unusual times. So thank you for everything you're doing and everything that your team is doing. I know it takes a team to pull everything through as well.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me, Nikki. I love your show.
Thanks a lot. All right. All the best. Tyler Downey on the Nikki Clarke Show, and we'll keep transforming lives one story at a time. Bye for now.